So here I'm going to be giving my review of Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Yeah, I know at the time this video is being published, the game's been out for months. Took a while to put this video together, beat the game a couple months ago, but there was a whole lot of side quests to do in this game and I only had so much time. Took a while to finally do it, that's why I wanted to wait till doing all the side quests, 100% in the game till doing the review. That way I can put my full thoughts out there. Now, like basically everyone else, I loved the first Insomiac Spider-Man game from 2018. It was amazing, spectacular, all of the Spidey superlatives. You know, before the Batman Arkham games had really set the standard for superhero video games, the heights they can reach. And I think that Insomiac Spider-Man game was just on that level. It was that good. The overall portrayal of Spidey and the villains around him would get my vote for one of the best media incarnations of Spider-Man, rivaled only by the tragically short-lived Spectacular Spider-Man series. Then a few years later, they released the Miles Morales game for the PS5, which was fine, but it was more of like a glorified 5-hour demo. It was a pretty short game. The real sequel now comes 5 years later, released in 2023, with the proper sequel titled Marvel's Spider-Man 2. I'm guessing the reason for Marvel's in the title is to differentiate it from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 from 2004. The story here sees Peter Parker and Miles Morales working together in defending the city when an army of hunters arrives in New York, making heroes and villains their next prey. But soon an alien symbiote comes in to even the odds, and well, you can guess where the story goes from there. Now, I played the game on the spectacular difficulty. That's the second highest difficulty overall, only Ultimate is above that. But when you play the game the first time, all you can do is spectacular, the second highest. I just came to realize that playing on Amazing, which I did on the first game, was just too easy, so I wanted that upper challenge, and it definitely had its rewards, which I can go into a little later. Now, gameplay-wise, the combo flow system is the same here. The game does cut back on a lot of the Spider-Man gadgets from the first game. The first game had about like 9 gadgets that you could use in quick time, but this game goes from 9 gadgets to roughly about like 5, and only 4 you can use at once. The gameplay element that really differentiates it from its predecessors is how you go back and forth between playing as Peter Parker and Miles Morales. Peter, I think, definitely gets a majority of the gameplay time here in what feels like about a 65-35 split. There are segments in this game story-wise where you're playing as Peter so long and then you almost forget like, oh yeah, I forgot I'm actually playing as Miles Morales here. So I definitely think Peter got most of the gameplay here. Although you do end up realizing when playing as both how kind of overpowered Miles Morales is compared to Peter. Naturally both have the same kind of physical attributes in terms of their strength and agility, but then Miles has the whole bioelectricity thing going on and then the invisibility, though I will say that the use of Miles' camouflage ability is used at the absolute minimal here, and I think story-wise you don't even use it perhaps once even. Had it not though been for Peter's nano arms, which he developed at the start of this game, you'd be like, what the fuck? There's a huge power difference between the two Spider-Man here. Though obviously once Peter gets the symbiote upgrade later, the odds begin to get evened out in terms of who's the actual stronger Spider-Man. Now, combat-wise, mob fights definitely feel a lot tougher than the first game. You have a wide variety of enemies here that require different moves to take them out. When you're faced with a group of like 8 or so enemies, you're rarely able to execute a full combo. When you're just absolutely swarmed, you'll get a few hits, then you gotta dodge, use gadgets, all that kind of stuff to survive. In this game, you gotta take full advantage of your entire arsenal of abilities and gadgets to not only survive, but thrive in combat. If you don't, well, you're again, this is from someone who played on the spectacular difficulty setting. Besides the gadgets and the special moves, I do believe the most meaningful combat and gameplay change here is the healing system here. Similar to the first game, you got to build up what's called focus to heal. Although in the first game, you can build up focus in order to heal just by punching an enemy a few times. You'll get basically a little bit of focus per hit, and then you can heal and you can basically be safe throughout your time fighting an enemy. In Marvel's Spider-Man 2, the system works roughly the same in how you have to hit enemies in order to gain focus. However, you got to get a full bar of focus in order to heal, meaning it takes a lot longer to be able to heal and save yourself from sudden death. This makes battles feel all the more intense on higher difficulties because you already know you're a few hits away from getting KO'd, so you gotta be strategic with your healing. This gets turned up to 11 with boss fights. Bosses definitely do not around on higher difficulties here. Again, you're only a few hits away from getting killed, so strategy, you gotta learn patterns. The key is gotta being strategic with healing though when you're getting that close to getting KO'd in every battle. Probably the most frustrating part for some of these boss battles was how all of them are like 3-stage boss battles. You'll get through the boss fight and you're like, oh, okay, good, we all done now. And then after that, you're just like, oh my goodness, another stage, and then another stage. Basically, all of them are like 3-stage boss battles. There's even one surprise story boss, one boss I didn't know was going to be in this game, and that ended up being not a 1-stage, not a 2-stage, not even a 3-stage, 4-stage boss battle. To at the end, I was like, holy shit, I'm exhausted after doing this. But it does make these battles rewarding though, because you can't just heal for free in this game, and plus how these bosses do require timing, strategy, and learning the patterns. Once you get past them, it makes you feel like, wow, that actually felt worth it, feel accomplished actually learning this boss and getting past it, even though some of them are pretty tough. Definitely though, the biggest what the fuck gameplay element in this game is the returning Mary Jane stealth missions here. Now this is something that was featured in the first game, where there would be parts where you got away from gameplay as Peter Parker, and all of a sudden you'd be thrust into a situation where Mary Jane is sneaking around to either get information or acquire something, that kind of stuff. Those missions though, I will say were a nice gameplay break in terms of adding some variety. Though in this game, Mary Jane definitely takes her sneaking around to the next level, as she gets into just some crazy and fucking ridiculous situations. I will say though that unlike the first game, which kind of chickened out when it came to her game over scenes, due to the nature of her missions in this game, that means if you fail, you see her get her absolute ass whooped if you were to fail any of these MJ missions. At times though, it really does feel like the game is trying too hard to take her away from that typical damsel in distress that Mary Jane was initially always portrayed as, just because some of these situations are just like, I don't even know what kind of superhero would try to get into some of the situations she's in right here. It's pretty crazy, some pretty horrifying situations the game throws her into. But it does break up some potential gameplay monotony, and some of these situations she's in do have some nice atmosphere and tension to them. In talking about breaking up the gameplay monotony, I love those moments where you're doing things that you definitely don't expect to be doing in a Spider-Man game, like infiltrating Kraven's base James Bond style wearing a tuxedo and being a waiter, moments where you're riding a roller coaster with Mary Jane, or times that you're just riding a bike, things that you never thought I'd be doing in a Spider-Man game. Additionally, the new ability, the web wing ability that you used to glide around the city, was fantastic and made traversing the city really fun, as it meant you didn't have to constantly web sling to get everywhere, which is still great by the way. Me though, gameplay is only one half of a great video game experience. You gotta have a top-notch story to go with it. Now the core of this story is divided into 2 sections, each dominated by a core Spidey antagonist. The first half of the game is the Kraven the Hunter show. In this story, Spidey has never encountered Kraven before, but in a twist in how the story normally goes, how Kraven comes to New York with the intent on hunting down Spider-Man, well here Kraven has the intent of hunting down all super people that inhabit New York. That includes both heroes and villains. What's great here is how the story makes Kraven's threat and presence to a whole nother level compared to how he's normally portrayed. You know, Kraven is comfortably in most people's top 10 Spider-Man villains, but for the most part, he's never been on that level of what I consider to be Spider-Man's villain big 3, and that's Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and Venom. Needless to say that the writing and use of Kraven in this story is fantastic in terms of his effectiveness as a villain. You know, he has a scene with a Spider-Man villain from the first game here that establishes how he is not a guy to be with. And I do believe that his second phase of his boss fight here in this game was the hardest gameplay section this game had to offer. The way that Kraven is presented here will be the standard for the character going forward. Then comes the second half of the game, when that's where the symbiote and ultimately Venom takes center stage as the antagonist. Admittedly, there's no more predictable storyline in terms of how it's been presented in superhero media than Spider-Man and the Black Suit storyline. We've seen it multiple times across many different forms of media. And the way things play out between Peter and the Black Suit here is nothing we haven't really seen before, though I will say things do begin to escalate nicely, and there is a cool horror vibe they add to it, especially the scenes that Mary Jane is involved. Venom himself, I'm more mixed on here. He looks great in this game, but definitive Venom for me will always be Alien Symbiote plus Eddie Brock revenge story equals Venom. All other versions that deviate from this don't quite feel like Venom to me, though I guess it's not always the worst thing to deviate from the familiar, but I just think that makes for the best story. As teased in the first game though, Harry Osborn is the source of Venom here. Things escalate nicely in terms of how the symbiote takes over. What starts off as something kind of fun and helpful and a team up between Peter and Harry slowly develops into something different once the symbiote decides to use Peter and ultimately Harry as a vessel. Once Venom and Harry and the symbiote combination takes over, the story takes on an alien invasion type approach that puts New York into some serious shit. Given what happens to New York at the end of here and how crazy things get with the alien invasion and all these symbiotes going around, the only thing that I could think of is where the are the Avengers to help out? This isn't a universe where Spider-Man is isolated, the only superhero around. You've got the entire Marvel heroes just living in New York and none of them come out to help. Given how this is a universe where there are other Marvel heroes around and how crazy things get, that makes this whole alien invasion thing at the end just seem really silly, how there weren't any heroes to come and lend a hand or something like that. This isn't a simple Spider-Man City, New York type of story. This is an annihilation of Earth kind of story. Though some of the visuals that I will say when it comes to the symbiote taking over New York were pretty damn cool and just ominous and just like, wow, wish I could just swing through the city, even though this shit is pretty horrifying to see. I think though the story arguably gets too big for its own good, though it does have some rewarding moments in terms of how the full threat of the symbiotes come about. I did enjoy how the story though seamlessly integrated Spider-Man villains that were not present in the first game. I've talked about Kraven and Venom, but you also get Sandman, the Lizard, and Mysterio in a sort of side quest mission type format. Besides the big flashy stories of Kraven and Venom, there was a really nice touch to this story that I didn't expect to see because I didn't really watch a whole lot of trailers for this game, was how they brought back Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative from the first game, into this sequel. This led to arguably the best character moments in the game, and this was for Miles Morales, and how there was even good stuff written for Mr. Negative himself in here. Of course, when you're done with the story, there's plenty of side missions to keep you busy on your quest to platinum. That's why this video took so long. I was definitely super thankful though that there were no side quests that involved just swinging around and waiting for crimes to happen in each district. That was easily the worst part of all the side missions in the first game. But there's plenty of stuff to keep you busy here. I talked about the side mission with Mysterio. That was pretty cool. But then you got some stuff with Sandman, some type of other stuff that involves Kraven, and even one that has sort of a tie back to Across the Spider-Verse. That was a pretty amazing one to watch the end of that storyline. The overall package of Marvel Spider-Man 2 comes together quite nicely. It was a great continuation of the great universe established for Spider-Man in the first game. Having a story that had, really great stuff in the first half with Kraven was great. In all honesty, the game could have been just entirely Kraven. He was that good as a villain in here. But there was some fun stuff once the symbiote came to take hold. I just was a little more mixed on Venom here than anything else. But to the game's credit, it didn't fuck up the symbiote storyline, which, as we've seen, doesn't always happen. So 9 out of 10 webs for Spider-Man 2. I think my experience with this game was definitely heightened by the fact that besides some of the initial gameplay trailers that were shown, I didn't watch any real story trailers for this game. I kind of stayed away from all that. So a lot of the story elements in this game, characters, villains, boss battles were completely fresh to me. But that definitely, I think, heightened my experience in a positive way, obviously. There really wasn't anything that was spoiled for me in this game. How I stayed spoiler free for so long, given how quickly some of my friends beat the game, I don't know. I guess I just got lucky. Despite all the things featured in this game, there's still a fun future to be had with what's to come next in this franchise, with all the villains that still have not been used yet, all likely to be seen in the third installment, which apparently, according to the end of this game, is billed as the final chapter. We'll see if that ends up being true. If you want to see my full walkthrough for the game, you can just check the link I have right here on my other video game YouTube page, Game for Game. So that'll do it for this long-awaited review for me of Marvel's Spider-Man 2. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching.